Hey there guys, welcome back, Ricky here. Alright, today I have a knife restoration video of a very beautiful Shun Kuritsuke. This knife here actually has been restored by me, and basically I used something very archaic. I basically used my backyard and my stairs as the tool for this video. And the idea for this video came about because a lot of subscribers asked me, do you really need really expensive whetstones, diamond stones, or diamond plates? 1,000, 3,000, 6,000, 8,000 grit stones to restore a knife from being chewed up, like this knife was here, to its former glory. This knife here was completely chewed up. It had these massive gouges on the cutting edge that were about 4 to 5 millimeters deep, and there was about 2 or 3 of them that were actually very, very prominent on the belly itself. And so this knife here was completely unusable when I first got it out of the box. So the challenge in this video was actually how to clean the edge up, at the same time maintain this beautiful rocking radius that this knife has. And so there were 2 types of stones that I used for it. The first type of stone was actually a red, kind of a red cement-like stone. And so this stone was actually found in my backyard on the top of the retaining walls and by the stairs. And so that grit level is about 40 to 50 grit. That's I'm not really exaggerating. I'm pretty sure it's about 50 grit if I had to give it an equivalent to something. Now the really difficult thing about sharpening or kind of trying to fix your knife on something this coarse, there are massive, massive rocks that are inside of the, inside of the mixture itself. And as you are sharpening, rocks actually pop off or pop out of the mixture and will sometimes pop into your eye, or sometimes will just kind of cause the knife to skip. The second thing was getting a really nice even push, because all the rocks and all the little, sediments inside of the concrete was different size and they weren't really homogeneous. My pushes were actually like skipping around sometimes, and sometimes not even pushing straight. And so, when you have a problem like that and trying to maintain a radius that this knife has is very, very difficult. So basically what I had to do was I simply, I kind of muscled it through, kind of worked my way through for a good 5 or 10 minutes before I was able to ground out an area that was relatively smooth enough for the rest of the knife to actually be sharpened on for the rest of the video. So it took, like I said, about 10 minutes to actually get a little kind of a 6x6 area that was relatively smooth. It wasn't quite smooth in terms of what you would think of when you think of the word smooth, but it was smooth enough for me to actually work on consistently back and forth. So one of the most important things I did for this knife here was I made sure that I didn't spend too much time in any one area, and I didn't spend too much time on one side of the knife. And after every 3 to 4 times I turned the knife over, I would stop and take a look and re-examine the knife. Now surprisingly, as coarse as the red concrete was, it was actually taking off material, and it was actually slowing down because I was taking off so much material from grinding so much of the knife. Now this knife here is heat treated to a 61 on a Rockwell scale, so fairly hard, especially for a stone that I've never used before, and definitely not a wet, it's not a whetstone that was designed for sharpening. It's just basically a slab of concrete as a retaining wall. So it took about 20 minutes of going back and forth in the grinding process to actually pull off like 99% of the really rough spots. From there, I needed to sharpen the knife. Now that the knife has been fixed and the edge and the profile has been maintained to some degree, I basically now had to figure out how to sharpen this knife. And so I kind of walked around my yard for a little bit, figure out what I can pick up. So I figured that the stairs actually made a good place, because the stairs use a similar mixture, but it's a little bit finer. So I would say that on a grit level, it's probably 150 grit, maybe 120. It's quite rough. On a really good day in a really good area, it might be 200. But I figured this would be my sharpening portion, or my mid, my mid level between this and the next level. All of the major, chips have been removed. All the gouges are gone. At this point, I'm basically prepping the knife and prepping the edge to go onto a finer stone. And so I just started grinding away. My strokes were a lot smoother, and they were a lot more precise as to what I was doing. So after about 10 minutes, I re-evaluated the edge, and at this point, there were no more gouges at all. It was completely a new edge at this point, which I was very happy with. This knife has a really nice thin profile all the way to the upper middle portion of the knife, so I didn't really have to worry about thinning the knife at all, which I was really glad about, because I don't know how I would thin this knife using just my backyard and my steps. So the edge has been repaired, the chips are gone. Now I have to think about sharpening. And so I thought, what could I possibly use to sharpen my knife in my backyard? And I said, you know what, let's bring the brick back. It has been, I don't know how long exactly since I've used the brick, but I thought it was time to use it again. It's probably 6 months or so since I've used it. It's been a very, very long time. So I was actually very excited. The only concern I had for the brick was two things. That one, it was actually soft or too soft to sharpen a knife with a heat treatment of 61, 62. And two, I've never flattened the brick, so it was actually pretty lumpy from all of my other sharpenings. So I basically just went to work, and I took my time with the brick, and I really just make sure that I focused on really proper technique and holding a really nice clean angle, because if I can hold a good angle, even though they're like little rocks embedded in the brick itself, if I can hold a good angle, there's a very good chance that I can get a really nice clean edge, which is what I want. The brick, I don't know how many grit it really is. It could be 800, it could be 1,000, but then there are rocks in there that would bring that average down to maybe like 500. Sometimes there are rocks that are like a quarter-inch thick, and then there's sometimes little pebbles in there that are like, a millimeter thick or so. But there's plenty of rocks embedded in this brick. The hardest knife I've sharpened up until this point was a 58, which is a Wusthof. 58 and 61 doesn't feel that different, but on a brick they feel very, very different. Basically, the knife was hydroplaning the entire time because it was so hard. Now, one of the most challenging things I've found in this process was how difficult it was to feel the knife's edge. Being that it's heat treated to a 61 at the core level, it really just was so hard for this brick. And so I can probably tell you now that the brick is hitting its limits at 61 Rockwell. And after that was done, I basically just did a really quick cut test and see how the edge is. And surprisingly, it actually cuts okay. Now, mind you, this is a brick. This is not a whetstone. This is not a 500 grit whetstone. This is not a 1000 grit whetstone like my Chaucer 800 or the C-Hero CRX 1000. This is a backyard brick that I've just picked up. Now, considering the fact that this knife here, roughly 30 minutes ago, had a completely chewed up, unusable edge, to get it where it is now, I was actually pretty satisfied with it. The knife was able to cut, it just wasn't cutting that well, and it definitely wasn't cutting at the level that you would want to have a knife sharpened at if you were to use it in your kitchen. But it wasn't bad considering the fact how bad the edge was. So I figured let's go back into the studio and strop the knife. This is a strop that I've just made. It's a 12 by 3 inch rolled buffalo with some 7,000 grit Norton diamond compound. And so I just basically went to work, spent about 15-20 strokes per side, then did a really quick cut test, and surprisingly the edge was not bad. Overall satisfactory. In terms of a sharpness level, I would say it's about a 6. And so now at this point I'm thinking I can either go to a 14,000 grit to clean up the edge some more, but I said, instead of doing that, let's just stay at the 7,000 grit level and strop some more. So I spent another 15-20 strokes on each side, and then voila, the edge was actually very, very clean. Clean enough that I would say that it can be used in most kitchens. I would say unless you were running a sushi restaurant or something like that, this knife here is actually pretty good. Definitely sharp enough to be used in my personal kitchen. My standards may be very low, but please understand I'm a very average home cook. And the most important thing is, this knife here went from being dead and completely unusable to now a knife that anyone can use in their kitchen, which is the point of this video. Now obviously I can get this knife sharper, I can give it a better edge. Now this video for me wasn't about getting the sharpest knife possible. It was all about bringing a knife back to life with a really torn edge without a budget. It was all done in my backyard with things that were already there. And so it really shows you that even on a high-end knife, such as this beautiful Shun here, that you don't need very expensive tools and whetstones to actually get a knife back to life. That was what I was really trying to achieve was, can anyone do this? Can anyone just grab a knife that is completely chewed up and restore it using what they have in their backyards? And the answer is yes, you can. Anyone can do this. So even though this doesn't have the sharpest edge possible, it was actually sharp enough for me to actually be proud of, and knowing that I did this using nothing but my hands and the steps of my backyard, it felt really cool. Now this is actually, to me, this is actually kind of a special knife because this is the first time I've restored a knife without using any sort of expensive whetstones. And so I'm actually very proud of it. And I really like the profile. It's very clean. It's a very nice, elegant knife. Definitely a very sexy knife, if I can say so. Every month, I'm actually going to take a knife that needs to be restored and send it to a random Patreon supporter. That's just a way for me to say thank you to them for supporting me financially every single month. Alright, so I don't know who this is going to yet, but I will contact you on Patreon over the next 24 to 48 hours. This will be coming to you on the house on behalf of Perfection and of folks over at Cutlery and More who sent this knife here to be restored. So if you enjoyed this video, give the video a thumbs up. If you want to see more like it, please remember to subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.